trying to do over the last few spring and fall clinics is bringing an outside speaker, and we realized that you guys have a ton of data out there, whether it's harvesting or planting data, and a lot of times we don't know what to do with it. Terry Brase is our speaker today. He's been in the precision farming education system for 20 years. He's been at Hawkeye Community College and now Kirkwood Community College for the last 15 years. He knows a ton about precision farming, and we are extremely happy that he would join us today and then talk to you guys. So with that, I'll turn over to Terry.
All right, thanks. All right, can everybody hear me? Okay, I'm going to have to use my teacher voice, I guess, here. I get home here at night, and I'm still talking like this to my family. So, okay, use your normal home voice. All right, so yeah, I've been teaching about 30 years, and I think it was back in 1993 that I got my first GPS unit. And that's when I started doing precision farming, started teaching about precision farming. So I've been it for 20 years now. So I really appreciate John Delaney. Actually he's a former student. He's the one that invited me here to speak. And how many of you know John Delaney? Okay, raise your hand. There's John. Okay, so he's a former student, and he thought it'd be good for me to come talk about data analysis. Okay, what do you do with that data? And that's one thing that it's kind of a favorite subject of mine. First of all, I'd like to establish a couple of things. I am an Iowa farm boy. Okay? I grew up in northeast Iowa, Clayton County. Grew up on a hog and beef farm. Took over a dairy farm. So yeah, straight Iowa farm boy. Haven't been over here in western Iowa much. Northeast Iowa, that's called Little Switzerland. We got some hills out there. Finally made it to western Iowa the last few years, and I can see you guys got hills out here too. Most people think Iowa is pretty flat. The other thing I'd like to note is I think I do qualify as an expert, and that's mainly because I come from more than 100 miles away. All right, that establishes me as an expert. Hopefully, the 20 years experience does some good too. The other thing I'd like to point out before I really start talking about data is now I am a college professor, so I'm used to lecturing in front of my students. This is a little bit different group. I'm not quite used to just talking to farmers, but I do like feedback, all right? And as a speaker, I want to be able to see feedback from all you guys, and you can ask questions, whatever, but I like the bobblehead feedback method, okay? What that means is, like the old bobblehead dog, okay, if you agree with something with the head, just kind of nod your head a little bit, and I can see that you're all understanding it. If you don't understand what you said, you can either shake your head no, or at least a little, furrow in your brow, that gives me a good indication that maybe you're not quite understanding things. I hope John doesn't have to stand there the whole talk. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start talking about data. First of all, I'd like to point out data collection isn't new. I think farmers have been trying to collect data for years. Back when I was in high school, we were raised on the family farm. We're interested in the yield from a field. How many bushels per acre. We knew how many bushels were in the bin. When we harvested oats, we knew how many bushels of oats were in the bin there. That was important. Okay. Soil sampling. Actually back home we didn't do a whole lot of soil sampling, but we kind of knew what we had applied for manure. We kind of knew what the nutrients were out there, and that was important. Rainfall, of course, is always important. We kept track of how much rainfall was there. Crop scouting. Crop scouting's been popular in the last 20 years or so. And there's a manure application. We knew how much manure was being applied to the field. So that's all data. The question is how is it actually being collected? How is it stored? How are we looking at it? And mainly, how is it used? Was it actually being used for decisions? And that's what I kind of question a little bit. Now, I've got one story. When we moved to this dairy farm, as I said, we had one our hog and beef farm, then we moved to a dairy farm. We got to that dairy farm, there's a hay barn in there. We're talking about record keeping here, right? So we go into this hay barn, and we found out how my grandpa had kept records for the last 50 years. It's on the post on the hay barn back to 1954, I think. The number of bales for each cutting were etched into this post in the hay barn. Now I could see, how many bales were first cutting, second cutting, and third cutting since, way back in 1954. This was 1974, so he had about 20 years of records there. Okay? That's what you call permanent records, right? But, is it usable? Can you actually use it to make a decision? My thought, precision farming is about decision making. Okay? It's not about the technology, okay? It's about the decision making. And this is something that I try to stress to the students. The program that I developed at Kirkwood, and I developed several programs at Hawkeye, Kirkwood, and I've helped many schools across the nation develop their precision ag education programs. And the main thing I stress, this is kind of a little circular decision making here. Okay? If you're going to make decisions, you don't necessarily need precision farming. Okay? Any type of decision, you're going to collect the information, you're going to collect data, you have to analyze that information, you have to try to interpret it, and then you make a decision. Well, precision farming just helps you do that. Right? Because in data collection, you're using GPS. You're doing it out in the tractor. You're going across the field. You're collecting data. Okay? And that data can be valuable. And that's mainly going to be my point here. Okay? So you have data collection. You end up with a bunch of data. Okay? Then you try to analyze that data. Okay? And the purpose of analyzing that data is you come up with all this information. Okay? Once you have this information, then there's somehow you have to interpret it. And my main point here is that the technology doesn't do the interpretation. Okay? You still have to do that. You still have to figure out what the technology is telling you. Technology is going to help you collect the data and analyze it, but you're still going to have to make the decision. Okay? Now, how you use that technology can help that decision. You still have to make the decision. All right. So how things have changed. You used to collect all this data. What's changed now with precision farming? One thing is that the data is geo-referenced. Okay, and what that means is though that the number of hay bales that was written on the post, instead of written on the post, we have it on the map. We have it in the computer. Okay. And we have one layer of how much hay came off that field, and we have another layer here, another piece of information here of the nutrients where that hay came from, and all of a sudden we can match them up. We can see where the hay came from and where the nutrients are. We can start figuring out, well, maybe this needs a little bit more potassium on it, or maybe we need to do this. Okay, so you can start making some decisions from that. Okay, it can be collected accurately. Okay, I grew up the farm. I know what's the soil samplings. Some guy goes out there and collects random samples from around all over the field. With GPS, we know exactly where that sample was taken. We know those nutrients are coming from that spot. Okay, and it's collected consistently. Okay, it's not well, when we get around to it. You got these GPS units out there, you're going across the field, the planter unit is going across the field, the combine is going across the field, you're collecting data. It's being done consistently. Alright, there's a term out there. I started hearing it this summer. It's called big data. Okay, anybody heard that term? Big data? It's going to be something you're going to hear about. Big data refers to all this data that we have now. And that's one problem that we're starting to see in precision farming is there's too much data. What do you do with it all? The key thing is when I tried to teach, oh, we've got Jake down here. Jake Nelson, he's a graduate of the program. Interpretive maps. Okay?
You guys don't know how many times.
We need, if we're going to make use of this data, we need interpretive maps. And that's a map that allows us to look at it and help us with that decision. Okay? We're not talking about 2 or 3 maps. You got them all scattered around. You know, or you got maps in a notebook. You know, I've seen those. You got the binder. You know, you get the co-op. You turn the pages. You got one page for the or you got one page for the nitrogen. You got one page for the yield map. Okay? We're talking something that's on the computer that you can line those maps up. Okay? Something that's a little bit more useful. Now, one example I've got in here. I've got a couple of them, I think. Okay, there's a typical yield map. Okay, this is from the school farm, from the Kirkwood School Farm, and it's a typical yield map showing green is for good yield, yellow is average, and red is kind of poor. Now we've got these areas here. We're going to try to interpret it, and the people have done that for years. Okay, my warning against that is don't try just to interpret a map from here, not by itself. Okay, unless you know something specific. What we need to do is match this up with some other type of data, and there are ways of doing that. Now, the one thing I will interpret, see this big red area here? Okay, you can guess what that is. I don't think you'll ever guess. Anybody want to take a guess there? What's that? Okay, that would be a good guess. Actually, what happened though is our agronomy instructor had that area in a test plot. It was a corn test plot, and for some reason he forgot that was corn the previous year, and we normally do a corn-soybean rotation. So the 3rd year of this field from that test plot, he forgot that little area there had been corn, and he didn't apply any insecticide. So this is what happens when you have continuous corn and no insecticide applied. All right, so here's another map now. Now this is an as-applied fertilizer map. To tell you the truth, I dug this data the last couple of days. I'm not sure exactly what fertilizer, but it's a map that I had stored on the disk, and I was kind of in a hurry, so I just put it up here as an example. And what this map shows is the white areas, the white grids, those are lower fertilizer applications. I don't remember the exact amount. Low fertilizer applications. Dark brown, darker the square is, the higher the fertilizer application. Okay? So now we've got another map. Now, several years ago, I was invited by ISU, and this was quite a few, probably 20 years ago, I was invited by ISU Extension to show some of my yield maps to the farmers. Okay, and talk to these farmers about the yield maps I had made. And this is 20 years ago, so there weren't too many people making yield maps at that time. And after I showed off the maps here, the ISU Extension guy says, you know, those are just pretty maps. What? And I was just pretty maps. They don't tell you anything. And, you know, I was pretty insulted. But, you know, he was right. You know, just having that yield map by itself didn't really tell you much. Well, his point was that, yeah, you have to match it up against something else. Okay, so then we got these fertilizer maps. And here's a map that's laid on top. Now, this is probably too small for a lot of you to see, but all I did is take this map and put this map over top of it. Okay? And that way we can see, well, where we applied more fertilizer and where we applied less fertilizer and try to match up the yield to the fertilizer. Okay, so it's just laid over top. Showed this to a consultant, and he said, you know, that's pretty neat. Yeah, you can do that. But how useful is that? Does that really still tell you anything? And again, I was kind of insulted. Okay, maybe not. Okay. He said, you know what would really be useful, something I would really like to see, I would like to see a map where you could tell me or show me how many bushels per fertilizer unit. So for every 100 pounds of fertilizer, what are your bushels? That way I could say, with this 100 extra pounds of fertilizer, you increased your yield this much. That's what I would like to see. It's like, oh man, well, now what am I going to do? So, that's when we developed this class called Ag Spatial Analysis. We come up with this map here, and that's exactly what we did. What you've got to realize is that if you have the data, computers, you know, we people, we see the maps, we see the colors, you know, and we can kind of try to figure it out. The computers see the numbers underneath the map. Okay? The computer sees every little square here is little numbers. Every little square here is numbers. Okay, so what we can do is we can add and subtract maps. And that's kind of interesting. People don't even really think of that. But you can take a map, two maps, and add them together. What I did is I took these two maps and some other map, but I basically divided the yield by the amount of fertilizer. Okay? So what this map is basically what that consultant asked me for is, what is your yield per pound of fertilizer applied? So for every pound of fertilizer applied, I have a yield here. Now you see this green area here? This looks like it's a pretty good area here. That green area shows that we have a higher yield. No, not really. Yield from this area and this area are really no different. The difference is that we applied more fertilizer here and less fertilizer here. So actually, this area did better. We had the same yield here, but using half as much fertilizer. Does that start to make sense? Okay? If you know how to do the math, if you have the data, it's unlimited what you can do with that. Okay? Okay, I'll have another example. We have something called a temporal analysis map. What I can do is take 4 years of yield data. Okay? And again, computers think of data as numbers. So I can take 4 years and I can add all 4 years together on top of each other. I can divide by 4 and I come up with a 4-year average yield. Okay? What that tells me is I can see what areas are consistently high and I can see what areas are consistently low. Okay? Do a little bit more math and I can start subtracting each year off the average and I end up with what's called a stability map. So I can see areas that, what areas of the field, you know, are up here one year and down here the next. And I can see the areas of the field that are consistent. You know, the areas that are consistently yield. I can find those two maps and I can find those areas that are high consistently and those areas that are low consistently. And I can see those areas that change quite a bit or are very unstable. I've got a lot of co-ops telling me that's the kind of map that they want to do seeding prescriptions. Okay? That's an interpretive map that allows the farmer and the co-op to make a decision. Okay? They know the areas that are consistently high. Okay? They can put a little bit more seed to, a little bit more fertilizer to. Those areas that are consistently low. Okay? Yeah, they're not going to do much with it. So they can use that variability. Use those maps to help them make the decisions. Now, this isn't going to be my whole Ag Spatial Analysis class, and my point wasn't to teach you how to do these things. The point is, with data, there's a lot of things you can do. You know, there's a lot of decisions you can make if you have the data. You need data from every pass in the field. Okay, you're driving that tractor across the field, and I try to get our technicians at Kirkwood to do this, and I know it's hard. You know, we get some student is not familiar with the tractor, and he's much less familiar with the GPS control, precision farming controls, and we don't get a map. I would like to get a map of every manure application across the field. Okay? If we can get our farm technicians and our farm students to, every time they spread manure, they can turn on that GPS and they get a map where they spread that manure, that would be valuable. I would like to know for our farm where that fertilizer is being spread. Remember, I'm a farm kid. I know what happens when you spread manure. You know, you go out with the tractor. I spread enough manure in an open air tractor without a cap that it starts getting windy out. You're gonna be going in one direction. You're gonna go this part of the field, get it spread, and you're back inside. Okay. So what you end up with is fields where you get 3 or 4 applications in one part of the field, and maybe not as much in some other part of the field. Is that right? Maybe. Okay. If I had a map showing where that fertilizers are actually being spread, okay, that's useful. We had a map once. We had an exercise with the students. We had a tractor. We did a subsoiling exercise. Every student was required to do a couple of passes with the subsoiler and collect precision farming data with it. Okay? It's very interesting, you know, the fact that we subsoil, but students are supposed to report the depth of subsoiling. But what's most interesting, when we made that map with all the students' data, was a fuel efficiency map. We made a map of the fuel efficiency of that tractor as we were going through the field. And to be able to see the difference between students, every 2 passes the students made, and of course, the data included the student's name, so we knew exactly, you know, this student here, not sure what they did, but they did have very good fuel efficiency, whereas a couple of these students had excellent fuel efficiency. Okay? Excellent data for learning how to subsoil and operate a tractor. As applied maps, I just explained the manure fertilization. Okay? Everything that you apply to that field, everything that you do to that field, you collect data on it. It's really not that tough. Yield maps, key thing on yield maps is calibration. There's an awful lot of maps out there that I don't think are calibrated yield maps. You have to make sure that you work with your horizon, with your technicians, make sure that you get your combine calibrated. Plant health and stress. There's new equipment out there. Crop Scout, they can go out and take a quick tissue test so that they know exactly the health of that plant, what kind of stress that plant is undergoing, and the nutrient needs of that plant. The drones is one way of doing that. In fact, we just bought a UAS. We bought a drone at Kirkwood, and we started flying it over our fields to determine nitrogen needs of our cornfields. I've heard or read about these little robots now that they can send out in the fields. Little robots, they automatically go up and down the rows. They check the nitrogen on a regular basis, and they can inject nitrogen where the nitrogen is actually needed. Okay? And they do it automatically. And finally, the nutrient maps. That would be an example of actually the robots would be an example of that. All right. Yeah, there's my name, there's my contact information, email address. Key point of what I want to make sure that you understand is that farming is a business, and businessmen must make accurate, unbiased decisions. Okay? The best way to do that is with data. Precision farming, we have ways of collecting more data, accurate data, consistent data, and data that there are ways of analyzing it for more information. And information that can give you opportunity to make that good decision. All right, I'm going to be around here the rest of the day. If you have any questions or any further comments, I'd appreciate hearing from you. Otherwise, thank you very much, and I'm going to turn it over to the next section here.